you've ever said something honest and then immediately wanted to crawl back into yourself, if you've ever finally spoke your truth and then spent the next 3 days replaying the conversation in your head, if you've ever thought, why do I feel bad for being real, then this transmission is for you. Because guilt after truth is one of the deepest trauma patterns in people pleasers. And I want you to really hear this, not as a concept, not as a quote, not as a nice Instagram line. Guilt is not intuition. Guilt is not your higher self. Guilt is not a sign you did something wrong. Guilt is a nervous system response to the threat of emotional disconnection. That's it. Not morality, not spiritual misalignment, not karma. Just your body saying, if I'm honest, I might lose love. And today we're not fixing that with mindset. We're not reframing it with affirmations. We're not bypassing it with just be confident. We're going into the body, the emotional body. Energy body too, because this is where guilt actually lives. Hi, I'm Cherry, a spiritual life coach, numerologist, and an energy body mentor. And I work with people who are emotionally intelligent, deeply sensitive, spiritually aware, but completely disconnected from their own emotional safety. People who can read everyone else's feelings. People who can regulate everybody else's emotions. People who know exactly how to keep the peace, but don't know how to exist without guilt. And if you're here, I'm going to assume something about you. You don't struggle to speak. You struggle to feel safe after you speak. And that's what we're dismantling today. Let's start with the biggest lie in personal development. The guilt means you crossed a boundary. That guilt means you hurt someone. That guilt means you are out of alignment. No. Most of the time, guilt means your nervous system just experienced an emotional risk. That's it. Guilt is the emotional body's reaction to potential rejection, possible abandonment, loss of emotional safety, and threat to attachment. It's not ethical, it's biological. Your body learned very early on that connection equals survival. So if speaking truth threatens connection, your body produces guilt to pull you back into compliance. Not because you're wrong, but because your system equates honesty with danger. This is energy body too. The emotional body doesn't care about your values. It cares about belonging, attachment, being held emotionally, being included, being safe in relationships. So when you speak truth and feel guilt, what's actually happening is your emotional body is saying, I might lose love, not I did something bad. Energy body 2 governs emotions, attachment, intimacy, relational safety, emotional memory, fear of rejection, people-pleasing, guilt, shame, over-empathy, emotional regulation for others. This is the body that learned, who do I have to be loved? Not consciously, somatically. This body formed in childhood, in your family, in your first relationships. In every moment you learned this version of me is accepted. This version of me is too much. This version of me creates conflict. This version of me keeps me safe. So most people don't speak truth from an energy body 2 perspective. They speak truth from the mind. They say the words, but their body is still bracing for rejection, which is why the guilt comes after. Because the body hasn't been taught, I can be honest and still be safe. So let's name it properly. You're not afraid of being honest. You're afraid of disappointing, upsetting, being misunderstood, being disliked, being emotionally alone. You're afraid of losing emotional safety. So you manage, you soften, you explain, you justify. You over-communicate. You apologize for your truth. You package it nicely. You deliver it gently. And you preempt their reaction, not because you're kind, but because your body is terrified of a relational rapture. That's not weakness, that's conditioning. This is where year 1 and year 10 come in. Year 1 identifies the rebirth. Year 1 is about new self, new identity, new ways of existing. And the core question of year 1 is, who am I when I stop managing other people's emotions? Who am I if I don't soften my truth? Dilute my needs, regulate everyone else, shrink my feelings. Who am I if I'm just me? This is terrifying for people pleasers because your identity has been built on being liked, being needed, being agreeable, being safe. So when you speak truth in year 1, your entire identity shakes because you're not just changing behavior, you're changing who you are allowed to be. Now, we're also in a year 10, which is emotional completion. Year 10 is the opposite energy. It's release, integration, completion, and embodiment. Year 10 says, I no longer abandon myself to maintain connection. It's the year where emotional contracts end, old roles dissolve. The fixer, the mediator, the emotional caretaker, the peacekeeper, the one who absorbs everything. Year 10 is where you stop negotiating your existence. So this week sits perfectly between year 1, who am I becoming, and year 10, who am I no longer willing to be? And guilt is the bridge between them. Now I want us to move into the body. I want you to think of something you haven't said, something true, something honest, something you're holding back. Don't say it, just feel it. Now notice, where does guilt live in your body? Now, most people feel it in their throat or chest, stomach, or their solar plexus, or even in their jaw. That's energy body 2 activating. Now, instead of analysing it, breathe into that area, slowly and deeply, and say intentionally, I am safe to feel this. Not I am right, not they are wrong. Just I am safe to exist with my truth. This is how you retrain the emotion. This is how you retrain the emotional body, not with logic, with safety. Truth without guilt doesn't come from confidence. It comes from emotional self-safety. It's the ability to feel discomfort, potential rejection, emotional risk, all without abandoning yourself, without collapsing, without apologizing, without over-explaining, and without self-betrayal. You don't need to be braver. You need to feel safer in your own body. So the real work isn't how do I speak better? It's how do I feel safer after I speak? And in the next part, we're going to go deeper into emotional self-abandonment, why you over-explain, how your body learned to equate honesty with danger, and how to rewire your pattern somatically, not mentally, not spiritually, nervous system level. Because energy body 2 doesn't respond to mindset. It responds to felt safety. And that's where real sovereignty begins. So this next bit is about emotional self-abandonment and attachment trauma. Why you learn to feel guilty for being honest. I call it the invisible wound. There is a wound almost every people pleaser carries that no one ever names properly. It's not I don't speak my truth. It's I don't feel safe existing when my truth disrupts connection. That is emotional self-abandonment. It's not dramatic. It's not tragic. Just quiet, subtle, every day. It's the moment you swallow a feeling, minimize a reaction, change your tone, soften your words, dismiss your needs, laugh something off, take responsibility for someone else's emotions. Not because you're fake, but because your body learned this keeps me safe. And that's the part most spiritual spaces get wrong. They tell people, stop people pleasing, be authentic, speak your truth. But they never ask the question. What does your body believe will happen if you do? Because your nervous system has a story and it's older than your mindset. So let's go back to the original point. As a child, you were wired for connection equaling survival. So you learn very quickly which emotions are allowed and which emotions cause withdrawal, which emotions make people uncomfortable, which emotions create conflict, and which emotions lead to disapproval. And without realizing it, you built an emotional strategy, not consciously, somatically. You learned if I'm easy, I'm loved. If I'm quiet, I'm safe. If I'm agreeable, I belong. If I'm emotional, I'm a problem. If I'm honest, I might lose connection. So your emotional body created a rule. My truth is dangerous to attachment. And every time you speak honestly now, your nervous system flashes that old memory, danger, risk, or loss. And then guilt activates. Not because you did something wrong, but because your body is trying to protect you from perceiving abandonment. So let's talk about over-explaining, because this is one of the clearest signs of emotional self-abandonment. Over-explaining isn't communication. It's nervous system appeasement. It's your body saying, please don't be upset. Please don't misunderstand me. Please don't reject me. Please don't think I'm bad. So you justify, clarify, soften, contextualize, emotionally manage, and preempt their reactions. Not because they asked, but because your body feels unsafe with their potential response. Now, over-explaining is what happens when your emotional body doesn't trust. I am allowed to exist without being understood. It's a trauma response to relational unpredictability, and that is so exhausting. This is where year 10 energy comes in. Every people pleaser has emotional contracts, unspoken agreements like, I will stay small so that you feel comfortable. I will manage my feelings so that you don't have to. I will take responsibility for emotional harmony. I will sacrifice honesty for connection. And you don't sign these consciously. You absorb them energetically through family, culture, relationships, friendships, spiritual communities, and workplaces. Year 10 is about completing these contracts. Not with confrontation, but with embodiment, by saying, I no longer abandon myself to maintain emotional safety with others. And guilt is the withdrawal symptom, because your nervous system goes, wait a minute, we're breaking the rules here. So now we work directly with the emotional body. I want you to imagine the version of you who learned to stay quiet, to stay easy, to stay agreeable, not intellectually, but viscerally. See them, feel them. This is the part of you that learned honesty equaled danger. Now place one hand on your heart and one hand on your lower belly and say internally, you don't have to disappear to be loved. Let your body respond, not your mind. You might feel tightness, sadness, resistance, relief, even tears or numbness. All of it is energy body 2 unwinding. This is how you rewire guilt, not by convincing, but by reparenting the emotional body. This is where year 1 and year 10 meet. Year 1 says, I am learning who I am. Year 10 says, I am releasing who I had to be. And guilt lives between these two identities. It's the nervous system saying, I don't recognize this version of us yet. So of course it feels uncomfortable. Of course it feels wrong. Of course, it feels risky. You are literally teaching your body a new way to exist in relationships. And that's not mindset work, that's identity work. Here's the line that changes everything. You don't feel guilt because you're wrong. You feel guilt because you're no longer abandoning yourself. And your nervous system hasn't caught up yet. Guilt is the echo of the old self, not the voice of the new one. So if this part stirred something, if you felt emotional, if you felt exposed, or if you felt called out in the softest way, then good. That means energy body 2 is waking up. And in the next part, we're going even deeper into emotional boundaries, why you feel responsible for other people's reactions, how to stay regulated when others are uncomfortable, and how to hold your truth without collapsing or hardening. This is where emotional sovereignty actually begins, not in what you say, but in how your body stays with itself after you say it. Let's move on to emotional boundaries and nervous system sovereignty. This is all about how to hold your truth without collapsing or hardening. Now, most people think they struggle with boundaries. They don't. They struggle with emotional fusion. Now, emotional fusion means your nervous system is still wired to track and regulate other people's internal states. You don't just notice, oh, they're upset. Your body actually experiences, I need to fix this. Not consciously, again, somatically. This comes from growing up in environments where emotional tension wasn't safe. Moods were unpredictable. Love was conditional. Silent meant danger. And conflict meant withdrawal. So your emotional body learned other people's feelings are my job. Not as a belief, but as a survival strategy. This is energy body 2 in its shadow. Hyper-attuned, hypersensitive, hyper-responsible, and hyper-regulating. And when you speak your truth and someone reacts, your body doesn't interpret that as their emotion. It interprets it as, I have failed to keep the emotional field safe. And then guilt activates. Now, empathy, this is where I can feel you without losing myself. Enmeshment, I feel you and lose myself. People pleasers confuse the two. They think they're compassionate, but what they're actually doing is sacrificing their own emotional regulation to stabilize others. That's not empathy. That's emotional labor, and it's unsustainable. Energy body 2 becomes overloaded, burnt out, anxious, overwhelmed, and then collapses because it was never meant to carry everybody else's feelings. There are 2 trauma responses when you speak truth and face emotional discomfort. The first is collapse. You apologize, you soften, you explain, you retreat, you minimize, and then you self-blame. Then the second is hardened. You shut down, you detach yourself, you intellectualize, you go cold, you become unbothered, you disconnect emotionally. Now, both are nervous system defenses. Collapse says, if I shrink, I'll be safe. Harden says, if I don't feel, I won't get hurt. Neither is sovereign. Both are survival. Sovereignty is staying present, staying embodied, staying connected to yourself, even when someone else is uncomfortable. Now that is the work. Year 1 is the year you learned it feels safe to feel. Not it's safe when everybody agrees with me. Not it's safe when everyone is happy. It's safe to exist inside your own emotional field. Year 1 is where your nervous system learns, I can survive rational discomfort. I don't die when someone else is displeased. I don't disappear when someone misunderstands me. I don't collapse when someone reacts. This is emotional adulthood. Not confidence, not assertiveness, but emotional capacity. Year 10 is where you stop working for emotional approval. You stop managing reactions, buffering feelings, smoothing energy, carrying emotional weight and absorbing other people's mood. Not because you're cold, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself. Year 10 says, I allow others to have their emotional experience without taking it on as my own responsibility. That's emotional completion. That's sovereignty. This is one of the most important practices in this whole transmission. Think of a moment when you spoke your truth and someone reacted negatively. Feel it in your body. Now, instead of analyzing them, bring all attention back to your chest, your belly, and your breath, and say internally, I stay with me. Not they shouldn't feel this, not I need to fix this, just I stay with me. Let the discomfort exist without moving to solve it. This is how you train Energy Body 2 to hold emotional intensity without collapsing or hardening. This is emotional sovereignty. Now, here is a sentence that rewires everything. You are responsible for your truth. They are responsible for their reactions. That's not selfish. That's nervous system reality. When you take responsibility for their feelings, you abandon your own. When you allow them to feel what they feel, you remain embodied. Sovereignty is not control, it's presence. So you don't need a thicker skin. You need stronger emotional boundaries, not walls, not detachment, and not spiritual bypassing. Boundaries that say, I can feel you without becoming you. I can hold my truth without managing your response. I can stay present without self-erasing. That's Energy Body 2 in its healed state, emotionally connected, but not emotionally owned. So at this point in the video, I want you to realize something massive. You weren't scared of speaking. You were scared of staying with yourself afterwards. And in the next part, we'll bring it all together. We move into emotional self-trust, embodied communication, how to actually speak from Energy Body 2, and how to integrate this as a new identity, not a technique and not a skill, just a way of being. This is where guilt dissolves because the energy body finally feels safe to exist. Now, this last bit is not about learning more. It's about becoming someone different in your nervous system. Not a better communicator, not a more confident version, but a sovereign emotional being, which is all about emotional self-trust and embodied communication. It's how guilt dissolves when you become safe with yourself. There is one illusion that keeps people stuck forever. That one day you'll speak your truth and it won't feel uncomfortable. That one day you'll be healed enough and honesty feels easy. That one day you'll say what you mean and no part of you will flinch. That's not how the nervous system works. Sovereignty isn't the absence of discomfort. It's the absence of self-abandonment inside discomfort. The goal is not, I never feel guilty. The goal is, I don't collapse when guilt arises. Because guilt is just an old signal, a memory, an echo. And the moment you stop treating it as a problem, it will lose its power. Now, this is the real medicine of Energy Body 2. Emotional self-trust means I can feel what I feel and not leave myself. Not I always know the right thing to say. Not I never make mistakes. Not I never hurt anyone. It means I trust my emotional experiences more than external approval. Now, most people don't trust themselves emotionally. They trust other people's reactions, other people's moods, other people's validations, and other people's comfort. So when they speak truth and feel guilt, they immediately turn away from themselves. They look outward. Did I upset them? Did I say something wrong? Should I take it back? Should I soften it? Should I apologize? That's not communication. That's outsourcing your emotional authority. Emotional self-trust is the moment you say, I am allowed to feel this and still exist. Now, embodied communication is radically different from normal communication. Normal communication is words first, body later. But embodied communication is body first, words second. It's when you feel your chest before you speak. You feel your belly before you respond. You feel your breath before you explain. It's when you ask, am I grounded in myself right now? Not, am I being received well? This is the key difference between performing truth and being truth. When you're embodied, your nervous system is present. Your emotional body is regulated. Your energy is coherent. So even if someone doesn't like what you say, your system doesn't collapse because you didn't leave yourself to say it. Year one is not about becoming confident. It's about becoming real. Now, real means you don't edit your emotions for safety. You don't filter your needs for acceptance. You don't dilute your truth for belonging. Year one is the birth of I am allowed to exist as I am becoming, which means you will be awkward. You will be messy. You will be misunderstood. You will be unpolished and you will be raw. And that's exactly what makes it sovereign, because your nervous system is learning. I don't need to be perfect to be safe. I don't need to be liked to exist. I don't need to be approved to be real. That's identity rebirth. Year 10 is not about trying anymore. It's about standing in your truth, in your presence, in your emotional authority, in your self-respect and in your nervous system capacity. Year 10 is where you stop negotiating. You don't say, is it okay for you, about your own existence. You say, this is who I am, and you let the world respond, however it responds. Not because you don't care, but because you no longer abandon yourself to maintain emotional harmony. Year 10 is emotional adulthood. This is the integration practice. This is what actually dissolves guilt long term. So I want you to sit or stand, whichever you feel more comfortable on, with feet on the ground, one hand on your heart, one hand on your body. Feel your body. Now say internally, I am here with myself. Not I am right, not they are wrong, not I need to fix anything. Just say, I am here with myself. Feel that. Let your nervous system feel that. This is self-anchoring. This is the moment Energy Body 2 stops seeking safety outside and starts generating it internally. This is the moment that guilt loses its job. Here is the truth. This is the truth that completes this entire video. You don't need to get rid of guilt. You need to outgrow the version of you it was protecting. Guilt protected the child who needed approval, the self who needed connection to survive, the identity that equated love with compliance. But you are not that self anymore. So guilt isn't a problem, it's a ghost. And ghosts disappear when you stop feeding them. This is a sentence that becomes a new imprint. I choose emotional self-trust over emotional approval. Say it again, not as an affirmation, but as embodiment. I choose emotional self-trust over emotional approval. This is Energy Body 2 healed. This is year 1 initiated. This is year 10 embodied. So if you take nothing else from this video, I want you to take this. You were never afraid of speaking your truth. You were afraid of feeling alone, feeling misunderstood, feeling disconnected, feeling unheld, and feeling unchosen. And now your nervous system is learning something new. You can be held by yourself. You can be safe inside your own emotional field. You can feel guilt and not collapse. You can feel discomfort and not self-abandon. You can feel reaction and not self-betrayal. That is emotional sovereignty. That is Energy Body 2 embodied. That is the end of the people-pleasing. Not because you changed what you say, but because you changed where you stand from when you say it. And again, that's not communication. That's identity. If this video stirred something in you, If you felt your body soften, tighten, release, or just wake up, that's Energy Body 2 reminding you who it is. And if you're ready to actually embody this work, not just understand it, this is exactly what we do inside my Stop People Pleasing Breakthrough session. Or you can pick my Boundary Building Strategy session. These are free 30-minute calls. This isn't mindset coaching. It's nervous system reprogramming, emotional sovereignty, and identity rebirth. And if this work resonates, make sure you subscribe. Stay in this space and let yourself keep becoming the version of you who no longer needs permission to exist. Because the truth is, you were never too sensitive. You were never too much. You were never just untrained in emotional self-trust. And now you are remembering. So until next time, stay safe and stay grounded. And bye for now.